Hi, Tony Poulos here at DSP Leaders World Forum 2025 in sunny Windsor. Today we've got Extra Shot. This is the Extra Shot session, and I have some hot shots with me in the Extra Shot. I have Chris Lewis, who is the Managing Director of Lewis Insights, and Camille Mendler, who is the Research Director now at Omdia, new position. Welcome both of you. Look, today's first session was, you know, it started to cover some very interesting points, but what stuck out for you first up, Camille?
I've got to be honest, the insularity of thought was striking and disappointing to me. The one thing that no one really talked about was who's paying the salary, and that is the customer. I think only one person talked about customers to any depth, and that was the guy Manish from Dell, about customer experience. So I think we are still misguided as an industry unless we grasp that customer need.
Well, outspoken as usual. Well done. Chris, I'm sure you're going to add to that somehow.
Well, I would like to point out that Gabriella did talk about the customer side as well, because it's a topic that came up at recent events.
But she talked about the mechanics of demand. That doesn't sound like a humanised answer.
But more around how the customer will drive the product in the future. I think that's what she was getting toward in the comments towards the end. But I agree. I think we have been way too insular in industry, and it takes people like Manish and Dell and outsiders to change the perspective. You know, we talk about transformation of the industry. This is such a major transformation, to begin to listen to what is being demanded of it from other parts of the IT industry. I think the other piece that obviously is always striking is, you know, we're talking about these moving parts. The discussion on RAN was an absolute breath of fresh air to me, because I think we've spent way too many column inches, way too many conferences talking about RAN. And in fact, I'd like to rename it the Also RAN, because I think we should be moving on and thinking about, you know, once again, the product we deliver, the industry we're in, the value we bring to the economy, and not looking so inwardly. In fact, we also we went back and talked about, you know, we need to start with the core. You know, well, we may well do technically, but we need to start with the edge and what we deliver to the customers, because that's what pays the bills, to Camille's point.
Yeah, but also, when they were talking about transformation, what's the answer? No one can transform us except ourselves. You know, the gentleman from Deutsche Telekom, only we can be integrators of our own future. God forbid we should interconnect with enterprises or customers of any sort.
No, but I think that was in the discussion about whether you're insourcing or outsourcing the skills to deliver all of the
It was
content.
more than that. It was like, really, we only understand ourselves, and let's just focus on our reality. But actually, to succeed, you're going to have to integrate with other digital ecosystems.
Absolutely. You've got to play nicely in the sandpit with everybody.
Well, I didn't hear that.
Well,
I did not hear that today.
No.
Not yet.
You can trust Chris Lewis to steal one of my best lines of the
come on,
day.
Tony.
I wrote down
You got plenty of
Open
good
RAN,
lines.
Cloud RAN, AI RAN now, and then I said, what's next? Also RAN, and of course he's jumped on it straight away. Thank you very much, Chris. Look, we're also talking about AI native, becoming AI native. And it's not so easy. Everyone said it's not so. Why? Why is it not so easy? What are the issues?
It's not. Do you want to communicate first?
All right, go ahead. I'll chip in.
I think the issue is very much that we're still not quite sure what it is. You know, it's a relatively immature market. By the way, we've had AI in telecom for years and years and years. We used to go to expert systems, and then it became machine learning.
Yep.
And that's within that controlled data environment, controlled data set. We can do plenty around that to reduce that operational cost that we talked about. But I think in terms of leveraging it in the generative area and in the agentic approach, you know, we've got to be very careful about releasing the Kraken. You know, it could be a very dangerous beast that we release if we don't have the right governance in place. And I know that's a slightly negative view of it, but I think, once again, if we're thinking about the end product that we deliver for the customer, we've got to be really careful that the data that gets ingested into those systems is the right unbiased data, and it delivers the outcome. And in fact, it ties back to the point that I think Gabriella made earlier on, that, you know, we've been focusing on the technology And I think there's a lesson from the outside of this industry. You know, you look at players like Cisco who've been talking about outcome-oriented solutions for a long time. We need to think about the outcomes, not about what we do.
All right, well, here's an outcome. Consider this. Almost 1 in 4 bids are not responded to by enterprise sales teams in telcos because they can't get the information together. There's 12, 15, 20, 30 different islands of information. That is where you use AI. And that is where you're going to make some money, because we are leaving money on the table that could be won. So AI is not just about using it in the network to create new revenues, but frankly, getting our house in order. And, you know, we don't talk about innovation around sales tech. Oh, it doesn't sound so sexy versus network tech. But let's remember, we need to make money.
Yeah, but they've got to have something to sell. And the problem is the new
Not
services
new
aren't
stuff.
coming quickly enough.
Let's sell the stuff we've got now better, right?
Well, what's that? Connectivity?
Yeah, well, there's a bit of that to be sold still.
Yes.
Absolutely. Come on. And some other things.
The guys talked about data again, how important the data is for AI, for everything, right? How long have we been talking about the importance of data, and when are we ever going to get it right? I can't stop thinking about how many years this has come up.
Almost as long as you and I have been in the industry,
yes,
Tony. Well, and it's been an issue, and I think it goes back to the conservative nature that was referred to in some of the discussion there. You know, why things don't get done, and you know, listening to the senior execs, the people on stage today, the CEOs of these businesses, they do understand what they need to do. You know, they're the ones who have the whole picture, but actually driving it through these sort of the bureaucratic organizations that exist within many of the telcos, not all of them, but within many of them, is the real challenge, getting things done. And the problem is that data is fragmented into many of those departments within the organization, and therefore we don't get that holistic view. So people like TELUS, who've taken the data and put it out into a cloud to break down those silos, will have a better opportunity to actually leverage it. And I do agree, by the way, Camille, that the sales piece is something we haven't focused on. We never had to sell in the past, right? The business came to the industry, and that for me is the biggest. It raises the question of channel as well. So yes, we do need leveraging it. I think Vodafone, I think Scott Petty's talked about ingesting all of the RFPs and learning from that, and learning from that in order to address RFPs better. But I think you're right. We need to learn how to sell, how to listen to the customer, and then understand what the product is.
Well, I know some service providers who've actually invested in this, who can give you a customer engagement score, which is going to give you a pretty good idea of what they're going to buy more of, the rational adjacencies beyond connectivity. That might be an AI experience or something like that, might be security or something driven, consumed via an API. So I think there's work to be done, and I don't think the execs know everything, actually.
They don't know everything, and I think part of that, and it occurs to me when you look at the new execs being appointed, if they're moving around from telco to telco, it's not exactly bringing in new blood, fresh thinking, is it? So I think we do need a bit more outside, but perhaps those people outside don't want to work in telco, you know?
Yeah, another thing that came up in the panel was the APIs, and we don't seem to get a grip on the APIs. Why is the jury still out on APIs, and why aren't we monetizing them after all this time talking about them?
There are very elegant means of consumption, right?
Right.
Of features and functionality. Again, I go back to why would you want to use this functionality? In what context, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell you, having spoken to, we've surveyed thousands of enterprises, they are interested in having control over quality of experience.
Yep.
Delivered via network, if they could actually control that credibly. Yeah, they would pay more for it, actually.
That's what I'm thinking.
I know for a fact that they would, but the tools are not available. The contracts are not available.
But it's also pricing often is not available, is it?
No, the pricing model is not clear.
So we
yet.
need to know what we're going to pay for this. But it fits in with certainly my thinking about the industry, where we used to develop things internally and eventually expose them to the customers. This is the customers reaching into the network and taking out identity or triggering quality of service or any of those things. And that's the big change. We need to, the business model we deploy, and it may well be by different channels, as I said before, not always the telco selling directly into the customer base.
No, it will be multiple channels.
A while ago, though, we talked about actually charging for the API usage. That was one of the thoughts that came up, like a charging per transaction, an API transaction. Why didn't we go there?
No, but there are some APIs where you would charge by transaction. Yeah. It is already happening. There's some established models around that. But not every API is appropriate for that type of payment model. That's the point.
You say not all APIs are equal.
They are not.
No, I think they're not.
Now listen, very quickly, cloud native came up as well. Boy, oh boy. A number of panelists talked about the issues of becoming cloud native. Are they surmountable, these issues that keep coming up? What is the issue with becoming cloud native? Core issue. No pun intended.
I think when any of these topics get the native label attached to them, whether we become cloud native, AI native, I think fundamentally we need to understand what business we're in, and we focus way too much on the inner workings of the technology, and cloud. Of course, we know cloud can help with the hyperscalers. In fact, in part of the discussion about the integration skills being more required in-house now. Of course, that becomes possible because we're using the hyperscalers to do a lot of the heavy lifting outside of the traditional way that we would have done that business within the telco.
Yep.
So it is changing. So are we cloud native? It doesn't matter. We're using cloud, we're using AI, we're using all these things to deliver the services that ultimately people will pay for, and that's the business model that we're in.
And Camille, a quick closer on that from you?
Well, we're not at a happy ever after yet, is what I would say. For sure.
Chris Lewis, Camille Mendler, thank you so much for being with me today. Hang on a second, because we're going to switch over now. We've got another hotshot session coming up a little later today. We've got 4 or 5 sessions coming up. And before we go away, I'd like to remind our viewers out there, you can send in questions to us, and you can have your say by taking part in our polls. You saw, if you watched the earlier sessions, Guy and Ray going through the poll results. We do want you to get involved with those polls, and you can do that. There's one each day for the event, and Guy and Ray will review the results at the end of each session. So thank you for being with us, and see you at the next version of Extra Shot.